Well, good morning. We'll start. We'll get going. Technical issues aside, it's so good to see everybody. So, what we'll do if you're joining us here on Zoom, we'll go through, introduce yourself. I'll just go through my list. I know it'll look different on your end. So, be prepared because who knows when you'll get called on. And this morning, what I'd love to hear from you as we get started is what have you learned in the past year? It can certainly be about business or marketing, or anything related to work, or it can be just what you've learned in general. On that note, I'd love to keep the conversation as far away from politics as we can, even though we'll be talking about the pandemic. I know it's hard to not talk about those two at the same time, but really the conversation is the pandemic forced us into a different way of living. We've had to make adjustments both in personal and professional lives. That's what we're here to talk about. And then I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned from my clients over the past year and some of the things I've learned even in my own business. So if that sounds good to everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. If you're watching on Facebook, by all means, use the comments to get going. You can chat with us using the comment section. I'm pretty good to monitor the comments on Facebook as well as the chat box here. As always, if you want to jump in live on the Zoom call, you're more than welcome to raise your hand, flag me down, and you can unmute yourself and we'll let you ask your question live. So with that said, let's get going. First on my list is Chuck. Good morning, Chuck. Tell us who you're with and what you've learned in the past year.
Hey, good morning, Josh. Chuck Horgan with Bernardo Wells Architects. And as you mentioned, just being adaptable and being flexible, just learning so many things on the fly, and just having to adapt, I guess. And that's been probably the biggest thing. But I learned a few new, using social media a lot more than I did in the past. Partly thanks to you and your seminars. And just trying to keep up good communication, probably the key thing. But with all these different platforms. So.
Yeah, no, that's great, Chuck. I appreciate that. I'm trying to take notes because I'll try to summarize some of these thoughts into. I always do a blog following Business Brew. I embed the video, but I try to highlight some of the things in the text. So I'll be taking some notes. I may or may not attribute them to you directly, so don't worry about that. All right, so next on my list, I have Dorothy. Good morning, Dorothy. It's so good to see you. You'll have to unmute yourself. Uh-oh. I was on the Zoom call while we're waiting for Dorothy. I was on the Zoom call where the person's interface was different because they were using a new version and they really struggled to unmute themselves. So to Chuck's point, being adaptable, I had to run into that too. The Facebook Live button was weird this morning. So, all right, Dorothy, looks like you got it all.
Sorry about that. Yeah, okay. I'm Dorothy Zumbreen with Cultivate Consulting. And yeah, so I have 3 screens as opposed to just 2. And so my cursor does weird things and I was trying to get it to the right place to hit the button. So
yeah.
Yay for me, right? So the biggest thing that I learned this year has been probably to pivot and to keep learning and growing and to learn new things so that I can make my business. I actually, for those of you that don't know me, like Josh knows me, I started my business during the pandemic.
Yikes.
So I lost my job partially due to COVID and was laid off and decided to start my own business. And so I've had to learn everything about how to do things in a virtual world, as opposed to one-on-one in an office or in someone else's office or in a boardroom or one of those things. So yeah, it's been a huge learning curve for me.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big theme today, pivoting, keep learning. You and Chuck both basically said something close to the same thing. And then kudos to you for launching your business in a pandemic. I know that can't be easy.
No, it's not.
Okay. Next on my list. Yeah. Next on my list is my good friend, Rob Rowley. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Good. Rob Rowley, I'm a local death and dirt attorney. So I do all things real estate and probate and the like. So a thing that I've learned is something that's kind of obvious to appreciate the simple things.
Mm-hmm.
I think we take way too granted things like eating out, time with friends, going to church. I mean, a lot of different things that we do. So again, just be grateful for simple things and just living each day. Thanks.
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Rob. And then Susie, you keep coming in and out, so I'm hoping we get you long enough to be able to introduce yourself and then tell us what you've learned. So feel free to unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, I'm unmuted. So, sorry for the in and out. I live in rural Whitman County, where I am the new SWITA person since last September. I actually, for whatever reason, decided I needed a job and took one during a pandemic.
Wonderful. All right.
And life around here, so I'm just learning a lot.
Oh, good. And so is that what you've learned this last year, is just learning a lot? Oh, and we lost her again. That's too bad. We'll have to, hopefully she keeps coming back. So that gets us through our introductions, and I think it's probably appropriate to introduce myself. I don't always do that in this. I think it's just, I might assume that you all know who I am. And so I'll just take a few minutes to introduce myself. I'm Josh King. About 8 years ago, I started a business called Tinderbox Consulting. And I started that. It's kind of funny thinking about this last year and thinking about a pandemic. I started my business when things didn't go according to plan. So in fall of 2012, I was working for someone else, as I had, since forever. I'd always had jobs where I worked for somebody else. And I found myself laid off. It was fall of 2012. And a friend of mine who owns his own business was getting together with a couple other business owners, and they were getting together just for drinks and to chat business and that sort of thing. And he invited me along and said, hey, maybe it's a good opportunity for you to meet people. And so I went thinking, I might meet some cool people and maybe come away with like a prospect or a lead on a job. And while I was there, I met a gentleman named Chris Stevens, and Chris Stevens was just taking over his family business. And the family business at that time was about 45-ish years old. His brother had been running it, and then his brother had transitioned, and Chris took over. And so Chris starts asking me all kinds of questions. He said, what do you do? And I said, I'm in marketing. And then he said, well, do you know anything about social media? And I said, well, being in marketing, you kind of have to, right? And so he said, you're the guy I'm looking for. You're exactly who I've been looking for. He said, let's get a date on the calendar. So we set an appointment. I leave. I'm calling my wife. I'm like, hey, I think I just got a job interview. So the next week I meet with Chris, and the first thing out of his mouth was, I can't afford to hire you. And I'm like, oh, like here I thought I was interviewing for a job. He's like, you don't want to work for me anyway. You want to start your own business. So what I can do is pay you like a contractor. And I was like, well, that's not really, I've never had that passion to start a business. Although my good friend Rob has always encouraged me to say, Rob had been leaning on me for almost 10 years to like not work for somebody else. He kept saying, when are you gonna do your own thing? Why do you want to work for somebody else? So Chris says, I can't afford to hire you. And I leave that just really dejected, going, I don't know. Well, Chris then introduced me to another business owner who owned a couple of restaurants, and he was in the same boat. Can't afford to hire you, but would love to have you as a contractor to help us out. And between the two of those, I could make more money as a contractor than I was making on unemployment. So I felt like, and this is, my personal journey, I felt like at that point, I was really being, pushed by God into that direction. And so I always put faith in the middle of what I do. If you read any of my mission statement stuff, it's right there. It's my mission is to serve God by serving others. And we'll probably talk more about that as we get going throughout the morning. So that was 8 years ago in February 2013. I started my business that same month. I met with Chris Stevens. And to this day, Chris and Uncle Dan's are still a client. And it's gotten to the point where Chris keeps trying to figure out how to hire me full time. And I keep moving the target on him. And I was just meeting with him the other day. We were chatting and he said, I would love to hire you. I just can't afford to hire you. You think you're worth more? And he's laughing. And I said, well, it's not that. It's I'm charging you a pain in the neck fee to go work for somebody else after 8 years. Because once you get used to working for yourself, it's really difficult to swallow that idea of going to work for somebody else. So, so that's my background. And so I'll lead that into what happened to Tinderbox a year ago. And like, I want to encourage you to ask questions. Feel free to use chat. You don't just want to listen to me for the next hour or so. But a year ago, so my kids were sent home from school. I think it was March 16th. It might've been March 17th. I know it was a Monday. So the week before we were told this would happen, and they got to finish the week. And then Friday was their last day. And then my kids were sent home. And it was, and so that first week was, I think everybody was trying to figure out what was going to happen. Like, what was this going to look like? And so I wasn't really concerned with my clients, and I had sent out an email to my clients about a month before. So the last live Business Brew. So Business Brew used to be live. For those of you who don't know, we used to do it at Fellow Co-working in downtown Spokane, and it was only live event. We would actually meet then at 7 in the morning, and we would have coffee and chat for about a half an hour. And then at 7:30, we would turn it over to the guest. And then we would go 7:30 to 8:30 at Fellow Co-working. And part of that weird time frame had to do with just, we were in a co-working space and we didn't want to be loud too long after 8 because people started showing up to work. So we all live. And I think our last one was actually the March Business Brew, and our guest was Leanne Smith. And she came and talked about business finances, and then for the entrepreneurs and business owners who own their own business. And she talked about the marriage between your personal finances and your business finances. And it was probably one of the best business brews we'd had. I ended up hiring Leanne in my own business to come work in. And I say to this day, it was the best decision I've made for both my marriage and my business. She taught us a lot about our finances, and we thought we were pretty good about it. And we knew there had to be a clear line between like personal finances and business finances from a banking standpoint. But she really helped us overcome the psychological standpoint of, you're a business owner, so you're seeing the finances of the business. And when the business takes a dip, it's hard to not have that reflect into your personal income, right? And not pay yourself consistently and those kinds of things. So Leanne was great. So when the pandemic hit, I'm pretty sure we took April off. I was just like, I don't know what to do. Let's just not worry about April, because at the end of March, I lost 3 clients in 1 week. So that first week of the pandemic, not much happened. And then by that last full week of March, I had 3 clients call me and all have to cancel their contracts. One of them was like an independent grocery store. They just, they got hit early when we didn't really know what everything looked like. And when not every grocery store was set up to do any of the online delivery things, curbside, right? We all think curbside's so popular now and everybody does it. I've actually talked to businesses that say they will keep it even after everything returns to, at least where we're past the pandemic in whatever form that looks like. So I know there are people out there, businesses who are going to keep that. And so it's funny that it took a pandemic. And this is kind of what I want to talk about today. And part of what was echoed in some of the comments, it took a pandemic for some businesses to realize there's a better way to serve their customers. And I think part of being in business is, if you really understand your customer and really understand what they want from you, you shouldn't wait for something like that to happen to make changes to better accommodate them. And the best way to do that is to ask questions. Whether it's through a formal survey. I know there are some companies out there that might do like an offboarding process where they send you a survey, or they sit down with you one-on-one and ask questions about the relationship. Those are all things that you can do to continue to prove your client relationship in and out of, a pandemic. So I lost 3 clients in a week. I think we took April off from Business Brew, and then May, and here's the grand irony. It looked like in May, like it kind of was over, and Spokane was moving into phase 3 or phase 4. And everybody was kind of like, oh, hey, how fun was that 2 weeks off? And so I actually had Gretchen and Emily from Bernardo Wills, where Chuck is at. I had them join me about how to get back to work safely. And that was our first online business brew. So speaking about how to learn things, or how to learn about your customer to better serve them, one of the things that I've learned is that Business Brew was such a great resource for people, and that people were really learning a lot, and that people were coming together. There was a sense of community, even though it's a different crowd every time, uh, and a different speaker every time, or a different guest. It really is designed. My idea with it was to support the small business and entrepreneurial communities in the Spokane area. Well, if I can figure out how to, following the pandemic, when we can do it in person again, if I can figure out how to keep recording it, we have an opportunity to bring this environment to more people. Because I don't know that we'll continue to do it on Zoom, but I don't know, not having some version to watch or engage with later isn't going to work. So it might be some version where there's a live group that's all together, and then there's an online community that feels like they're there. And I understand that there's going to be costs associated with that, but I'm realizing the value of being able to do Business Brew remotely, people remoting in. I mean, Dorothy's over in the Puyallup area, if I'm not mistaken. Susie just told us she's out in remote Palouse, and I love that community. I know there are people who've joined us. We've had people from the East Coast join us. So there's really a great opportunity to continue to create community. So on that note, I'm going to pause because Gretchen jumped in on Facebook and said what she has learned. And she's learned a lot about being nimble and resilient. She's echoing some of the things that we have heard. And she said, as a team, she learned how much more they need to communicate. The motto has been, if you feel like you are over communicating, you are probably communicating almost as much as you need to. And that, I think, is true. So communicate is something we've heard multiple times, and being resilient, I love that. And then being nimble, we've obviously heard that one reflected. And some of those are actually in my notes. So as we think about Business Brew in the future, just know I'm trying to sort out what, if and when we can have groups together in a in-person environment. Does recording it make sense? Does offering it in some live environment, some mix between the two make sense? I really do want to serve people and continue to provide this. And I want people who've been joining us the past year. This is episode number 12 of the Work From Home edition. I want people to continue to be able to participate, not just when they happen to be in Spokane on the first Thursday of the month. So just, I'm open to suggestions if anybody has any ideas or introductions to people. So back to, losing 3 clients in a week really stung. And I'm a stubborn person. And I don't know that I would have said that until the last few years, but a couple things have happened in my journey. The first one was I had an employee that was wonderful, and she worked for us for about 2 years. And when she was ready to move on to the next phase of her career, I had to hire somebody to replace her. And so I went through some interviews. I found a person who looked really great on paper and was a really, really good person, just wasn't a good fit. And so, but I was determined to stick it out. I really wanted to get this person up to speed and to fit into the business. And I really felt like the lack of success was my fault. Like it was a failure on me as a leader to get that person into the system and into, integrated into how we do things. And my wife had been telling me for a couple months that this isn't really going well. And she's looking at the books. She's our back office person. So she does a lot of the bookkeeping and works a lot with the accountants and does all the payroll and invoices. And she was really polite, but she kept saying, I don't think things are going well. And then finally she came to me and was like, look, we're in the red. And we're burning through anything we have saved in the business, and we have to make a change. And so that was my first experience with really just how stubborn I can be when people are trying to give me input. So I think one of the things that I've learned too, and that was about 2017, 2018. So it's within the last 3-4 years. But it was echoed when I lost 3 clients a year ago. So 3 clients. One was like I said, a grocery store that couldn't make the adjustments they needed to make and be able to keep me. So that and I understand that from a financial standpoint, they had other things that they needed to do to stay in business. The other one was a small business in town, and they've since come back. So that's great. So I lost that client for a couple months or a few months, and then they realized one of the things I'm going to talk about is they can't just stop marketing. That doesn't work. And then the third one was a weird situation where I was actually a subcontractor on a project, and the person I was working with, he lost a lot of his clients. His wife lost her job, and the company that we were working with together offered him a full-time job with benefits because their business is sort of pandemic proof. They're a government contractor. And so when he called me to tell me, he was really upset. And I was like, dude, you got to take care of your family. Like, don't worry about me. We'll be all right. If they've offered you a full-time job, that's sweet. So, so all three different situations, it wasn't like they all just went broke in a minute, like that minute the pandemic hit, but lost three clients. And the first couple of weeks, it wasn't such a big deal. And then you started hearing, there's all the grants that were coming out. Then there was the payroll protection, the PPP that came out. And I was getting emails from my CPA, and they're encouraging their clients to look into it. And I was just stuck. I was like, we don't need it. I'm not going to get a grant. I don't need a loan. And then it changed that the PPP was going to be forgivable under a certain amount, which I would qualify for because we wouldn't need a huge loan. And I was like, still, I don't need it. There's other people that need it. Don't worry about it. And so finally, one of the people on my CPA's team gave me a call, and he was asking me if my business had been impacted. And because I was saying, oh, thanks for calling. We don't need the loans. I don't want to look into the grant. And he goes, well, let me ask you this. Has your business been impacted? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, what happened? I said, well, I lost 3 clients. And he said, if those clients don't come back this calendar year, what would that look like? And I did the rough math. And I said, well, I'm looking at about $50,000 in gross revenue. He goes, that's not an insignificant amount of money. You need to be thinking about this. And so I got off the phone and I talked with my wife, and she's like, yeah, I think we need to look into it. So there I was being stubborn again. So and I saw this happen in other businesses. I saw restaurants that would have rather shut down than figure out how to do delivery or curbside. And then after a month or 2 months and realizing this was going to last for a while, have to make that change. If you had that mindset going into it, that we're just going to adapt and be flexible no matter what. If you're the first to sign up for Uber Eats, if you were the first to sign up for DoorDash way before a pandemic, you were kind of already in a good spot. But if you're one of those people who's like, I hate change and you have to eat in my restaurant no matter what, or we don't have a patio, like those are things that you have to be willing to look at, because local governments have been really trying to work with people to get this to be flexible, allowing these outdoor spaces when downtown Spokane was not really known for being an outdoor space community. The sidewalks aren't really designed for it. We love accommodating cars, so we have lots of parking, but not lots of outdoor seating. But they've been accommodating it by allowing some restaurants to have outdoor space on sidewalks and things like that. So that idea that Chuck has echoed, that Gretchen has said, that Dorothy said, this idea of being flexible and being nimble and ready to make a change will serve you even outside of a pandemic. What happens when you lose that valuable employee like I did? Well, I was inflexible and not nimble, and I was rigid and stubborn, and it cost me money. That process of then letting that employee go and then recovering from that took a year. I lost clients, I lost business. I wasn't doing the activity I needed to do to drive new business because I was cleaning up and then trying to restore the relationships that I had. So I wanted to start with my story from a year ago because it's real. It was something. I ended up getting the PPP first round, and then same thing happened. Our bank calls and says, hey, the second round is available. Are you interested in doing another draw? And I said, well, no, same thing. Like, no, we're fine. We've been fine. Things aren't where they used to be, but they're fine. She goes, well, it's based on Q2. Do you know what your Q2, 2019, 2020 revenue is and the difference? And I said, well, I haven't really looked at it. She says, it has to be greater than, 25%, or you have to have a decrease of 25% or whatever it was. And I went and did the math, and it was pushing like 40%. And it was like, okay, I guess, here I am being stubborn again. I guess we did lose revenue, and I guess things are off. So we did go for the second draw, and they're not huge amounts. We don't have a lot of people on payroll, but I was reluctant. And after a while, I realized, and this was something I didn't even have in my notes, but like I let my pride get in the way there a lot. And I think there's a certain amount of that business owners struggle with is, you start this business, you build it. In a lot of ways, you birth it. And then when things don't go according to plan, you're like, well, this can't be, it's gotta work. It's my idea. It can't be broken. I did this, and I know Rob has been flexible over the years, and he's told me, some of the line of work that he does now is different than what he used to do. And he's super thankful for it. But if he had been stubborn or didn't want to go down that path, he may have missed whole opportunities. So I want to jump in. Dorothy said networking online and teaching online will be a hybrid model for the future for sure. I know that a shift for networking online and I agree. I think that there's always going to be a certain amount of this online, and that we'll talk about that too, because that's another area where I was stubborn. So fast forward a year. Some of the things, here we go. Here in Whitman County, the pride has stopped many businesses. I work to show them how to step past that. You're absolutely right. Like, we're recording this. So if you want to send them this, Susie, when it's all cleaned up, by all means, send this to everybody. Like, here's what not to do. Thankfully, I don't know too many businesses that have gone out of business. I don't know. I wasn't working with too many restaurants or anything like that. So thankfully, I don't know it, but I know it happened. And I don't want to say it was all because they were stubborn, but we do know there was a good part of it where there were restaurants that would have rather defied orders than make a flexible adjustment. And when the governor came out, it was kind of midwinter and said, if you can have open or space, you can have you can have seating. There were businesses that are opening their windows and opening their doors, and and it's cold, but I saw their patrons wearing down jackets, wanting to be there to support them. And so I think you have to trust your customer base and your biggest fans in those moments, that they'll be flexible too, right? And that they'll adjust with you. So one of the first things that I learned, and please jump in, I don't want to be the only one talking for the next 40 minutes or so, but it never hurts to do the right thing. And I've seen this happen time and time again. And I'm not going to point fingers specifically at anyone, but one of the most common examples of this over the last year is where a business wants to share a picture, either of their team or of some happening. And because whatever's going on, and I've seen this from companies in different states with different, and I know there's varying degrees of restrictions. I mean, you've got Texas and Florida, which are, wide open. And then you've got states like Washington, Oregon that are a little bit more. Idaho seems like sometimes they're in between. So I know even in our area, you get varying degrees of what's okay and what's not okay. But for the most part, masks are still kind of, popular. Like, I mean, they're what's normal, especially in Washington, Oregon. You go to Idaho, you still see it to a certain extent. The CDC is still, recommending masks. So masks are like, that's been the normal for the last year. What I've seen happen is businesses want to post a picture and they don't do a mask check. And I have seen that if you post a picture with a mask, I have seen very little negative reaction to that. Nobody's going, hey, you're all wearing masks, blah, blah, blah. They get mad about it. No one gets really riled up about that. Those people are focusing all of their effort on news stories and what's happening in schools. Like, their energy is focused other places. Go read any news story about masks or stay-at-home orders or phases, and you'll see those folks show up. I have yet to see one of those people show up in a business post where a client or a business that I follow posted a picture with people in masks and then somebody jumped in and was negative and anti-mask. I haven't seen it. I'm sure it's happened, but I haven't seen it. What I have seen is really good businesses who are taking this seriously, who are normally enforcing masks, post one picture where they're not wearing masks, even if it was an appropriate setting, and they get some people who are like, hey, I want to do business with you. I don't really feel like it's a safe thing to do right now. And it's never been from like that cancel culture perspective. In fact, in some cases, I've heard of people just getting a text message from a client going, hey, you're not wearing masks in that picture. Do you want to, what do you, tell me about that? And then they've reconsidered the picture. If they had just posted with masks, I've even seen if the mask is just visible, whether it's hanging or you're holding it or you've looped it below your chin, that is even enough, because then you're signifying we were wearing our masks, we removed our masks for the picture, and you can assume we'll put them back on. So what, again, to not be political, whatever your stance is on that, you know, it tends to be 10% over here is the loudest and 10% over here is the loudest. And everybody else kind of falls in the middle and is okay doing the things that we need to do. So it never hurts to do the right thing. And that is advice that that goes in and out of a pandemic. That is, you know, I would never give somebody bad, terrible, unethical advice. And I don't want bad, terrible, unethical advice. So always trying to take the high road and do the right thing is something that's going to serve your business all the time. And I'll be honest with you, most of how I run my business is because of bad experiences at other places where I worked, and seeing how other businesses were run and just taking note and going, I don't want to run a business like that. I don't want to be that way. So that was my first one. Will just jumped in on Facebook. He said good morning to everybody, so I'm saying that. So good morning, Will. I know there's more people watching on Facebook, but Will's introduced himself, so I wanted to give him a shout out. We've talked about this a bunch, but having that flexible business model is going to serve you a bunch. And this is where I want to show a really good format for that, and a really good tool that will serve you in and out of a pandemic. And it's a play on the traditional business plan. So the traditional business plan is something that I think they're still teaching MBA students to do. I know that it's sort of the standard in the banking industry. So if you want an SBA loan or anything like that, they're going to require that standard business plan, which you can Google and find a format for that. It typically is a written document that's several pages long. And my experience with most people who wrote a business plan, if they did, is that once it was written, it went and collected dust and it was no longer used. So I have not really dug into doing business plans. I haven't ever done one for my own business. I don't really encourage my clients to do them. What I have found serves people better is the lean model canvas or the business model canvas. So this is a play on that. It has a lot of the same sections, but where this is different is this really forces you to think about your customer. And that's going to lead me into the next thing that I've learned in the past year, but we'll stay here for a minute and I'll just walk you through the boxes really quick in the order that you would do this, at least according to me. There's a really great course, and I'll share this in the chats, called How to Build a Startup, I think is what it's called. And in there, the person who leads that workshop, I cannot think of his name. I'll find it as I'm Googling. It's like Googling and talking. Like normally when I have a guest, I just get to Google while they talk, and then I can, you know, provide resources. Steve Blank is the person who instructs it. And then they also have a woman named Kathleen Mullaney. I don't think she was in the workshop when I first did it. This is a free course that anybody can take. I'm sharing it now on Facebook and it'll come to all of you in chat. So this Udacity thing is all about how to build a workshop. And the whole course is focused on the business model canvas. And the business model canvas is great. This one is the lean canvas, which is just a slight modification. I think this one's more user-friendly. So check your chat. It's a free course. I did it. I took the whole course. It's not short. So you're in for the long haul. And while it's focused on building like that classic startup, I think it's great for anybody who wants to start a business. And so the primary focus of your business model canvas is the customer segment. When you get into like business plan, I just judged 2 business plan competitions, and they all start with like your executive summary, which is the who, what, why, when, where of the company. And the who has nothing to do with the customer. I mean, they get to it, but the who is who's the team. Like that is hardly even addressed here. So the first thing we start with is your customers. So list your target customers and users. So who are the people that are going to buy your product or service? So you got to start there, and you have to be specific. What I have found in the last year is the companies that were the most specific were the ones that served their audience the best. So the one example that comes to mind is Main Market Co-op downtown Spokane. they made the pivot to do curbside, and then they eventually got into, I think they went to, I don't know if it was DoorDash or which one they went with, but I know they started with curbside because what they knew is that their audience, their demographic, the people who shop there tend to, they trend a little older in some cases. So they were one of the first that I saw that offered that special buying time for vulnerable populations. So that early morning hour that you can go in. So that was a quick pivot for them. But then I also saw, because I get their newsletter, I also saw that they made the quick pivot to doing curbside pickup. And it was really easy. They made it really easy. It was, you could call or email in your order. If you called, you could work with somebody, you know, to help get your order. They did this before they were even able to get their products online. So you have to think like a Fred Meyer who's doing curbside, all of their products are online. But Fred Meyer is owned by Kroger. That's a massive company. They are able to do that because of money, not because they're more nimble or flexible, but because they have the resources to do it. So smaller businesses I saw did things like call us, email us, text us. So then they did curbside. So they understood their customers. So understanding who's buying from you and being really specific is the first step. Then you're going to jump to the other side and you're going to get into the problem. And you're talking about, this says list your top 1 to 3 problems. And what they mean by that is list the top 1 to 3 problems that you solve for your customer. What problem does your product or service solve for your customer? So in a nutshell, Tinderbox, the customer is business owners or people in charge of a business. I could get more into detail. Typically, revenue falls between like 250,000 gross revenue to 4 million. I found I don't do a lot of business with that high end. It tends to be more in the middle. And the problem I solve is that they don't have in-house marketing. They don't want in-house marketing. They don't want to hire another full-time person. It comes in one of those versions of those. So who's your customer and what's the problem you solve for them? And then you outline what's the solution. Well, how do you solve that problem? So that's 1, 2, and 3. And then you can jump to you can jump to unfair advantage or unique value proposition as 4 or 5, and you can do those interchangeably. Don't forget when you're listing out your problems, you want to be aware of what are the other alternatives. So where are the other places that somebody could go to get your product or service? And it's okay to know this. I can't tell you over the years, I've been running a business now for 8 years, how many people are reluctant to even think about competition. They're like, oh, we don't, you know, you have to know. You have to know. It's smart, right? So I like to think about unfair advantage as, and this says something that cannot be easily bought or copied, but what makes you, your company, your process, what makes it unique in the sense that gives you a strategic edge? You know, what do you bring to the table that maybe other businesses or products or services don't bring to the table? And then what's a unique value proposition? Well, that's a single, clear, compelling message that states why you were different and worth paying attention to. So if you wanted to go 4 and 5, you could do that because you'll talk about your unfair advantage, and then that might help you with your unique value proposition. I also think that your unique value proposition should be your mission. Some version of your mission should be there. So my mission is to serve God by serving others. So at the end of the day, the mission of Tinderbox is to serve others. That's our unique value proposition starts with serving others. So once you get to there, and then it says here, you can do high level concepts. So it's like list your X and Y analog, YouTube equals Flickr for video. So this is where you get into like movie pitches. Well, you hear like, my favorite one was Under Siege is Die Hard on a boat. Right? So you hear that all the time, how they describe a movie by using other movies. So that's how you would do it. You know, my product is like this for this, right? My product is like a day spa for dogs, right? So that's what they're getting there. So now you have customers, problem that you solve for the customer, what the solution is, what gives you an unfair advantage, what makes you unique. And then what you want to do is, and this is one in my notes, and as I was prepping for today, this is all about the metrics that you'll track to make sure you know what's working. Most businesses are tracking revenue. Very few businesses track more than that, right? So you want to track data that's going to help you know if things are moving in the right direction. And this is incredibly important when things stop working or when things don't go according to plan. The way that I learned this, so back to my first story that I told, when I had to let go of the one employee and I spent a year recovering from that, is at about August 2018. So I'd been doing this process for about a year. So all this transpired, I think it was the fall of 2017 was when I finally let that person go. And then about August of 2018, I was like, oh my gosh, like business isn't back. Like, what do I have to do? Like well, and this is where I have to own this. I was tracking my marketing data, like how many impressions and engagements I'm getting on social media and my website, but I wasn't tracking any of my business development data. I wasn't tracking how many clients I had. I mean, if you asked me how many clients I had back then, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I could have probably named them, but I couldn't off the top of my head go, oh, I've got 6 project clients and 8 retainer clients or whatever. Like I couldn't have done that. So I needed to start tracking how many clients do I have at any given time. And then I needed to start tracking weekly. Did I lose any clients that week or did I gain any clients that week? So those all 3 are tied to revenue, right? So that's fine. And then what I started tracking was how many client meetings did I have in a week? How many new client meetings that like prospects did I have in a week? I do free marketing reviews as a part of my business model, which is back to that unique value proposition. So we do a free marketing review for any business that wants it. I started tracking how many of those was I doing in a week. And then this was the big one. The number one thing that I can do to drive my business, which has been difficult to do the last year, is workshops and presentations. Bernardo Wills is a client because they attended a workshop that I was at, saw me present, heard me talk about a free marketing review, asked for the free marketing review, got it, decided they needed help doing the marketing, and then we ended up in a professional relationship. That's my pipeline, that's my model, right? So I wasn't tracking any of that process. August 2018, I went, you know what? I probably just need to start tracking what I'm doing. So I started a basic spreadsheet that tracked all those things I was talking about. And just the simple act of tracking it held me accountable to what I need to do to drive my business. And the process of doing that, if I were to show you it, you would see my prospects and my client buckets grow and double over the course of the next few months. And I didn't change anything. I wasn't like doing new things or spending money on advertising. I just was looking at what I was doing and more importantly, what I wasn't doing as a way to hold myself accountable. And just checking in on that, I went, oh my gosh. And the first thing I did is I haven't done a workshop in a while. So I start reaching out to all my contacts. Susie's with SWEDA, or the Southeast Washington Economic Development Association. And I know that because prior to the pandemic and with Susie's predecessor, that was a huge partnership of mine. I would do workshops once or twice a year with SWEDA in the Colfax, Pullman area, sometimes even over in Moscow. And it helped me grow my network. It's a marketing tool. I use it for a lot of things. So one of the things I learned when I started tracking is I hadn't done a workshop in a while. So what did I do? I started calling around and seeing who wanted to do a workshop together. The next thing you need to track here is your channels, which is how do you distribute your product to the customer. So I have a direct sales channel. It's you got to come meet with me, whether it's Zoom or in person, and that's it. So everything I'm doing with my customer is trying to get them to my website to do the marketing review, and then it's a direct relationship after that. If you're e-commerce, you might be selling on your website through Etsy and Amazon. If you're e-commerce and you have retail, you might be selling Etsy, Amazon, your website, and physical retail locations, and maybe even through wholesalers and distributors. So for some people, they could have upwards of half a dozen or more sales channels. But for some of us, and I know Dorothy and Chuck's business, they might all fall into the same. We're all kind of like a direct relationship, right? There's only one way to buy from us, which is fine. You just need to document that. Cost structure, you got to go into what does it cost to get your product to market or your service? What are your fixed costs? What are your variable costs? What do you charge? And then what are your revenue streams? So that would go back to channels. What are all the ways that you make money? And this is another area where I was really stubborn before the pandemic, is I was all retainer. Like, you pay me monthly, and if you don't want to pay me monthly, it's not a good fit. And what I realized after I started tracking my data is I was saying no to clients. Not clients saying no to me. I was saying no to them because I was saying, oh, well, if you don't want to put me on retainer, I don't really do that. Instead, what I could be doing is, hey, we could work together on a project for, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. Once I became flexible to that idea, now I have two revenue streams. Now I have retainer clients and project clients. So project clients tend to be more short term. My retainer clients tend to be long-term engagements, right? Like I said, Uncle Dan's has been a client for 8 years. They don't want to hire somebody in-house marketing, although he threatens to do that all the time. It's not what he wants to do necessarily. He has other things that he can focus on. I can manage his marketing. He can outsource it to me. So business model is something that is great. Now, here's why I brought this up in terms of thinking about the last year and the pandemic. Most businesses choose to fill this out using either sticky notes or pencil because things change. You might think you're selling to one customer, but as you learn about it, you're really not. You're selling to another. Or as you start digging into this, you go, oh my gosh, over the past year or the past few years, we've done really good with, I'm going to pick on Bernardo Wills. We've done really good with orthodontists and dentists, but maybe we want to do more city parks. And that's a rough example. I don't know how much truth there is to that. But that's the example, right? They could say, we do really well here, and we want to keep doing this kind of work and work with these kind of customers, but we also have a passion for this customer over here. So they take that sticky note, they fill in all the information about what that customer is like, because that's different. Now they're dealing with, city governments or school districts or things like that. So they have to profile that customer, and then they add that sticky note. I've even seen it where a business puts this onto a whiteboard, and then they use a big whiteboard in a conference room that's shared, and they write this all out, and then they're constantly making changes to it, right? So the idea with the business model canvas versus the business plan is that this is a very flexible way of documenting how your business operates so that you can keep track of things and make quick changes. So channels for distribution, if you were a grocery store and everybody had to come to you, or a restaurant and everybody had to come to you, all of a sudden now you're going, that's not an efficient distribution channel, especially when we weren't even eating out there for a while. And you list different channels, right? I can do now delivery. I can do takeout. I can do curbside, right? All different kinds of things. The ski hill where we go, 49 degrees north, did this really great thing because they could only have so many people inside in the lodge. They took this door that was just an extra door that was never used for anything, and they converted it into a grab and go window. And then they called it the yard sale, which is just like a super clever name for a ski hill thing. And you could just walk up, order something with your mask on, grab it, and then go get back on the lift. My first question then is, why haven't they been doing that all the time? Sell stuff to people who don't want to sit down to eat, right? So again, you think about, boy, this is such a good idea. Maybe we keep it. So I want to talk about that because I think that echoed some of the things that Chuck and Dorothy and Gretchen had said, which is this idea that you need to be flexible, you need to be nimble, and you need to embrace things as they happen. Another quick shout out, June has joined us on Facebook. Good morning, June. Thanks for joining us. And she has sent me a note, and I will respond to that live. Yes, we'll get together. So we're all good there. Okay, so having that flexible business model is going to serve you. I talked about two things in there that were really key. And the first one is that mission statement. What I have seen in the last year is that the mission-driven organizations that really know what their mission is, and it's not to make money, whether it's we exist to serve God by serving others. Bernardo Wills, and I'll do a terrible job of summarizing this, but at their core is they want to build great communities, right? They that's what they believe in, that's what they exist for. What a great mission statement. So now as the pandemic hits, and maybe things change for a business, instead of posting about your product that's for sale or your service or this new widget or the thing, what you focus on, and you should kind of be doing this anyway, is what your mission is, right? We're all about serving our community. We're all about serving others. We're all about building great communities, whatever your mission is. I have a client that just did one. They're realtors and property managers, and theirs is, we believe home is the most important thing. Right. So for the last year now, the market for them has been crazy because Spokane's in this crazy boom. But like they could just be talking about home and what they believe in. Being mission driven is how you build this fan base that is absolutely in love with you. Think Apple, right? People at the early days of iPhones would stand in line to get the new iPhone. Not so much anymore because their distribution has changed, but you would see people lined up around the block at the Apple store to get the latest version of the iPhone. They're not doing that just because they love iPhones. They're doing that because Apple's mission is to challenge the status quo and think differently. And so every person lining up to get the new version, and I'm stealing this is all from a great TED talk from Simon Sinek. Those people are lining up because they go, you know what, I think differently too. And I like to challenge the status quo. And what a better way to show that to everybody than by having a phone with an Apple on the back of it, right? Or a laptop that I open in a coffee shop that has the Apple on the back of it. But I've seen this happen. I was on this really great call. The Coeur d'Alene Chamber was hosting it it was like June of last year. And they brought in 3 businesses to talk about what they had done to adjust to the pandemic. And then they asked me to join just to add commentary from a marketing perspective. Well, these 3 businesses did such a great job of being flexible and doing the things right that I have nothing of value to add to this conversation. But what some of them did, the first one was a restaurant. So they're shut down, they can't do anything. So what they started doing, Idaho got flexible on their liquor laws, is they started doing to-go meals with a bottle of wine, and they would pair it. Then they started doing case wine sales, because if you know anything about the pandemic the last year, alcohol sales have gone through the roof, for better or worse. And so they started doing a wine of the month. They started doing case sales. They started doing, you get your to-go order with a bottle of wine, and they weren't cheap. It was an expensive meal for 2. But what they had also done is they had done such a good job of always being driven by their customers. And I couldn't tell you what their mission is, but their customers were so in love with this business that they sold out of their wine dinners every day they did them. That they couldn't keep wine on the shelf. That they were not struggling in the traditional sense. Like they weren't making what they were used to, but they were able to fill the gap. The other one was a pet resort. So, the doggy daycare, right? It was Northwest Pet Resort. And the first thing they did was they were still allowed to take pets. They were considered essential. They did shut down for a brief period of time just to make sure their staff was safe and everybody didn't, no one had contracted anything. And once they got through that, they reopened for pets, and they called it concierge, but they were basically doing valet for dog. Drive up, drop off your pet, and take off. That's the service where they're like, why haven't we been doing this from the get-go? Most of the people that are dropping off the dog for the day are busy. They're on their way to work. Then they have to stop. They have to come in. And then they added, drop off your dog. When you pick your dog up, we'll bring your dog out and your order of pet food. And we'll just put it right in your car, right? And so then they started grabbing pictures of this. And this is where the marketing comes in. You're grabbing pictures of this. You're going live on Facebook with this. You're talking about it. You're sharing this with people. Hey, we're still here. We're still serving your pets. Hey, we're here. We're still, providing meals and a bottle of wine. So being mission driven is how you build people around you who just love your business and want to support it. So my PS to that is when things don't go according to plan, you have to be okay asking for help. And I'm the worst. I am so stubborn. So Rob really challenged me. Rob, it's so good you're on the call today, because I can point to you and people can see a face for the human who has probably challenged me the most outside of my wife in my life. Rob would always ask me, how are you doing? And I would say, oh, I'm good. And how's business? And I would say, oh man, so much going on. I stopped saying I was busy a long time ago, because you can be busy doing nothing. So I'd always say, oh, I've got so much going on. And he'd go, yeah, but are you making any money? And I realized that what I was doing, it was a smokescreen. And at one point we went and met, we were having lunch, and he asked me that, and I'm pretty sure I went, oh yeah, I'm so good, things are good. And then I went, you know what? I could use some more clients. And I realized if you're telling everybody you meet how great things are and how busy you are or how productive you are, you're kind of rejecting referrals, because instinctually what they're thinking is, you're so busy you can't handle any new work. I've accidentally done that again. I don't know what I've done the last 3 months, but I've had 2 prospects come to me and they both said, if you're not too busy to work with me, if you can handle it. And I said to both of them, I haven't had to tell anyone yet I'm too busy, like thankfully, but also like I don't grow that kind of a business. So I've never had to tell somebody, oh, I can't work with you right now. Like, I've always been able to accommodate. The worst thing I've ever had to say to somebody is, if you can wait a month while I wrap up a project, that would be awesome. So if you've done a great job of identifying your customer and really communicating your mission to them and being flexible with your business model, when it comes time to make a change, and when it comes time that when things are difficult, when you have to, you can ask for help and they'll respond. And it's not the same thing as saying, oh, woe is me, and doing the victim, but you have permission. You've built credibility with these people. You now have some capital, some relationship capital to say, hey, I'm currently looking to add a few new clients. Do you have anybody in mind? Or, I would love to do, I haven't done a marketing review in a while. If you know a business that could use a marketing review, please send them my way, which is a way different ask. But if you're not doing that, the reverse is you're saying, we have so much going on, please do not send me any new business. So I'll tell you how this works in real life. When I get somebody who needs really intensive graphic design needs, I don't take it. I can't do it. I'm not a pure graphic designer. If they want a brand new logo, I'll bring in other graphic designers, other people that are better at that. And I always try to refer my clients to 3 people, because I want them to get a feel for what the ranges in cost can be. And also, it's a personality fit. The person who's working on your logo, you should really have a good feel for that person. They should have a good feel for you, and you should get along, because they're going to be creating something that you're going to pay for and hopefully use for a while. So I always give 3 quotes. So I have one person that I refer to all the time. Her name's Kate Bassett. She's done my original logo, my light rebrand, and then my full rebrand that I just did. She's amazing. And I've referred to other people throughout the years. Maker Made's another one I refer to a lot of. They're out of fellow co-working. That's Millie and Brittany. But I'm always looking for like a third, and I'm always trying to find one. So I had a client years ago that was looking for new logos, and I was going out to get quotes, and I'd worked with this other firm on some projects in the past, never directly. We were just kind of always working side by side on some stuff, and I'd never referred to them. So I thought I would give them a call, maybe, grow a new relationship. So I gave them a call, and she was like, what are you looking for? And I told her, and she said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. So we sit down, and I'm not kidding you. The first thing out of her mouth was, we can't take this. We're too busy. And she goes on to tell me why and what's going on and everything. But at the core message there was, we're too busy. We can't take it. Guess who I've never referred to again? You let it out in the marketplace that you're too busy and kind of that you don't want it. Why would I send people to you again? Right? And that sucks for them. But that's the way things work, right? I don't have time to deal with somebody who doesn't have time to deal with me. I need people that want work, that can use work. I would rather just give work to a brand new graphic designer out of college than somebody who is as established as some of the people that you can refer to, if they're not willing to just treat every client with that same level of respect. It felt weird to me. Why would you say that? Why would you put it out into the marketplace that you're too busy? Even if the worst thing she said was, you know what, we would love to work on this project. We don't have slot in our schedule till, next month or 2 months. Is your client willing to wait? We'd love to do it. And then let me make that decision, right? And let my client make that decision. The idea of turning down work kills me. It kills me, especially if you think about now we're in a pandemic, right? You can't turn down work, but you can say, hey, we've got 3-4 projects in the hopper right now. They're all big projects. We will have an opening at this time. Worst case scenario, hire somebody. Bring somebody else on board if you can. That would be where I would go next. I haven't had an employee in a couple of years. That would be my next move, would be to say, hey, I've got to hire somebody. I've got so much work coming. All right, so you've all been listening to me straight for like 45 minutes. June's jumping in. She said, so much great info. You're spewing out like a volcano. Okay. Well, if you like it, I think that's fine. But hit me up if you have comments, questions, if you have anything you want me to talk about, I would love to do it. A couple of things on my notes though, that I wanted to talk about. So we talked about, all being mission driven, having your business canvas or your business model. The big one is you have to keep marketing. You have to. And I've seen this happen all the time. I'm going to share an article with you that comes from, I think the one I'll share with you is from, I have to look. I did all these marketing webinars, and I called them like COVID version. So I have to look where I put this, but I'm pretty sure it comes from Forbes. But the story is when just before the Great Recession hit, or the Great Depression, sorry, just before the Great Depression hit, so the 20s, Post was the category leader in the ready-to-eat cereal category. So Post owned that dry cereal category. That was a pretty new category, the idea of cereal and then milk. They owned that category. When the Depression hit, they pulled back significantly on their advertising budget and their marketing. Kellogg's, in response, doubled their advertising spend. Advertising sits under marketing. So marketing is everything you do to tell the story of your brand. Advertising is when you pay to reach people. So you still want to tell your story, but you're going to now pay to reach people. So Post cut back, Kellogg's doubles. They invested heavily in radio with a new cereal called Rice Krispies, featuring Snap, Crackle, and Pop that we all know now. Their profits grew by 30% during the Depression. They are the category leader in cereal, and they have never given that position up for 100 years. That's the power of marketing when things don't go according to plan. So it is a Forbes article. Here it comes in chat. Here it comes on Facebook. That story from history rings so true because I know businesses that made that decision to pull back. Now, does it mean I think of it a lot in the terms of movies and TV have this weird decision to make. In the last year, movies weren't able to keep shooting, TV shows weren't able to be made, and then now they're getting back to where we're starting to see new shows come out. But for a while, all production was on hold while we sorted things out. When production came back and as people started getting back to making shows, you have this decision to make. Do we address that the pandemic is real and feature our cast wearing masks? Or do we pretend it didn't happen in our movie, TV show universe? And you can see some are pretending it didn't happen. And I think that's fine. I think it's okay for people to escape and pretend that things, aren't bad. And I think that's fine. And then other shows are, like, hey, our show is based in the real world. We want to embrace that. And that's fine too. There's no wrong answer. But businesses have the same thing to decide when it comes to marketing. But I can tell you, if you want to pretend that the pandemic doesn't exist in your marketing, it's going to ring hollow and shallow, and it's going to feel like you're not in touch. And that doesn't even matter what level of the political spectrum you're on or where you land on COVID in general. But the pandemic is real to millions of Americans who've gotten it and the, thousands of Americans who've been impacted by a death. So we have to acknowledge it. So your marketing during a pandemic just changes. And that's where if you focus on your mission, as opposed to, selling product, you have such a stronger leg to stand on. I would be curious to know what Kellogg's advertising looked like for Snap, Crackle, and Pop for Rice Krispies 100 years ago. But the bottom line is people still had to eat food, right? Just because people weren't working and there was a lot of people unemployed didn't mean people didn't need to stop eating. But in our reality, people are working from home. That's different. People are wearing masks when they go out in public. We're not eating out. We're not doing all these things that we used to do. So acknowledging that in your marketing isn't a bad idea. So you have to keep marketing, whatever that looks like. I think I've touched on this a bunch, but you have to keep learning. One of the things that I hear a lot from people, especially as it relates to social media, is that I'm not good at it. I don't want to use it because I don't get it. I hear this one a bunch, but this is a different conversation, is it won't work for my business. I still hear that a lot. But I hear a lot of it didn't work, it doesn't work, I don't feel like it's working, I don't like it. And then what I hear is we would be better at marketing if we were better at social media. And so what I tell people all the time is where I see businesses fail when it comes to social media has nothing to do with actually like how to use Facebook or how to use LinkedIn, because those are all learnable, teachable skills. You can learn Facebook, you can learn LinkedIn. Chuck has, talked about that earlier, that he's learned a lot in the last year, especially as it relates to social media. These are all things that you can learn. The hardest part about all of that is having a good strategy that works well and that reaches the right people. Because to me, strategy is going to outweigh execution every time. Now, you should learn how to use Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever site, or TikTok if that's where you're going. But your strategy outweighs that. So thinking about what you're going to post is way more important than how you're going to post or how you're going to get it there. That said, there's some really great resources. I have to do some Googling again. And actually, if you're in the Spokane area, the Spokane County Library District has a bunch of resources. So does the City Library. This is a peek behind the curtain here for how I do stuff. But Spokane County Library has access to, the first one they have access to is Gale courses. And Gale courses are 6-week courses on professional development and personal enrichment. They have in the past had social media workshops. But they're live. They're live remote, just like this. They've been remote since before the pandemic. So you have to have that time in your schedule. The next one is, it was formerly lynda.com. It is now called LinkedIn Learning. And LinkedIn Learning is an on-demand online course for technology, creative, and business taught by teachers who are industry experts. So it's a variety of subjects taught by industry experts. And they have everything from like selling online to creating a digital marketing strategy. I've taken that course. They have all kinds of really good content. And if you have a Spokane County library card or library number, you can access that content for free. When it comes to figuring out your consumer or your customer, they also have access to 2 databases. The first one's called Data Axle Reference Solutions, which used to be Reference USA. So Data Axle has access to all kinds of residential information as well as business information. And then the other one, if it hasn't rebranded, is Demographics Now. So Demographics Now, Data Axle are really great databases for learning about customers. Gale courses and LinkedIn Learning are really great for learning digital stuff or learning in the digital world. So they're all online courses. And then another one that's a good one is Udemy. And I will share this link as well. Udemy is a peer-to-peer platform, and they teach everything. Like you can find a workshop on just about anything. Udemy is great as a resource as well. So I think in the last year, I know a lot of people were put in a situation where they were working from home. Their kids were at home too. And so trying to juggle learning might have been a challenge, but I also know a lot of people who took the opportunity to learn. They had maybe more free time than they'd ever had before. So they took the opportunity to deep dive into some tools that they had never considered using and getting access to some skills that maybe they just didn't have. So learning is great. And then the one thing, I'll end on a couple thoughts here. One thing that I have learned that is true, especially in the last year, is day in, day out, week in, week out, best practices don't change when things go wrong. So the best practice of being mission driven, knowing your customer, working on your business model, those things don't change just because things, went wrong. You keep doing those things. You keep digging into who's your customer, what's impacting your customer right now. So I work with a company that does office supply. Well, they've always done delivery in the local market for office furniture and office supplies. They're called Kershaw's. Well, when people started working from home, they just shifted their content to talk about how they can help you get your home office into better shape. And so they were promoting product, but they were doing it from this idea that we've always been delivery. We've always done home office. We can support you. We've got tools to help you. Give us a call. Tell us what your needs are. And, send us the dimensions of your space, and we'll help you get stuff that will work for it. They also talked about kids at home. They have all kinds of stuff for students. So they were talking about, all the stuff that we buy for our kids to take to school. They were talking about those kinds of things to help kids work at home. And then they were offering other things. Do you need a laptop stand because your kid is now Zooming into class? Do you need a mouse? Do you need a light? All these things that will help you in the pandemic. So sticking with your best practices and sticking with all those things, you don't have to change those things just because of pandemic. You have to maybe change the execution or the narrative, but you're going to keep doing the things that work. One of the things that's the most popular thing that any of my clients does, Bernardo Willis does it, Kershaw's does it, a bunch of my other clients do it, is a meet the team feature where you are introducing the team to your customers and to the people that follow you on social media. Those are always popular posts. It's a peek behind the curtain. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you with, and I talked about this a little bit, is you have to track your data. I know clients that were tracking their data going into the pandemic, and then they were able to gauge how the pandemic impacted their business in the last year. Some clients, it was a win. For some clients, it was the last year was really good for them. For some clients, it wasn't great, right? Like it's been rough, but the only way they know that for sure is because they track their data, and it goes beyond sales. Some clients have seen their sales dip, but have seen their engagement online increase. So what we can assume is they've got a lot of fans. They're just not in a position to buy yet, right? And maybe that'll change. So if we keep engaging them, keep up with our best practices, keep marketing, maybe that'll change. Okay, so on that note, that's where I'll leave you. I want to thank everybody who joined us on Facebook and on Zoom. I want to thank everybody that participated with comments. Everybody sharing with me what you've learned at the beginning was so great. The people who jumped in on Facebook, that was great too. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate all of your time. Next month's guest is a gentleman named Manuel, and Manuel's going to join us to talk about, I believe we're going to talk about business strategy, which was also, for those of you who did the survey, we sent out a survey asking what you wanted to know. That was one of the top requests. People want to know more about business strategy. So tune in June for that one. And with that, have a good rest of your morning. Thank you so much for joining us.